Good afternoon, N4A family. My name is Christine Ball, and I will serve as the moderator of today's webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for another installment of our spring webinar series. Today's session is titled, Utilizing Athletics Alumni for Student-Athlete Professional Preparation in the Midst of COVID-19. I will allow our presenters to introduce themselves. Ladies, take it away.
Christine, thank you for that introduction. My name is Danielle Grobmeyer. I serve as our Assistant Director of Development for George Washington University, specifically for athletics. I have been in athletics for over 15 years now. I competed as a Division I student athlete and then was coaching for 10 years and then moved over to the administration side. And I love every single aspect of my job, especially getting to work with Sarah. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Sarah, now.
I appreciate it, Danielle, and N4A. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share a little bit of our own experience with this group. Like Danielle said, my name is Sarah Villaro, and I'm actually Senior Program Manager at McChrystal Group. But during my time at GW, I oversaw our student athlete development programming, and a lot of that was career and professional preparation. So really excited to jump into this today with you all and share a little bit of our own experience. So first, we wanted to provide an overview of what we're going to cover and what we really hope that you all get out of this. So specifically, we are going to take you all through a few really specific case studies to some things that we saw that worked really well and some things that we learned from at GW when COVID hit and the world of collegiate athletics as we knew it just really shifted. And then we are going to go into, we may actually have a guest appearance at some point, and then we're going to go into opportunities and challenges, and then end with our hopes for the future, not only for GW, but truly collegiate athletics and higher education in the future as well. So we really hope that you all can get tangible things from this that you can take back to your own campus, to your own departments, and really implement right away. So it's meant to be practical and tangible, and everything that we shared today, feel free to reach out to Danielle or myself, and we're happy to share resources. It's really about sharing. None of these are really huge nuggets, but it's more so sharing our experiences of what worked really well and what also didn't go as well. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, we first wanted to take you kind of through a timeline of how this evolved. Sarah came on to join GW Athletics staff as an intern first, and she did such a phenomenal job that we hired her full time to do our student athlete professional development programming and kind of really develop a leadership academy for us. But then COVID hit in March. I think we all remember our exact time and place where we were in the world. And when we found out the news of the NBA postponing their schedule, and certainly affected us in many ways, as I'm sure you all can relate. But we hope this time, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a timeline, and this can kind of show our evolution of where we are today, because we didn't know that this partnership was going to happen until COVID happened. So in March, we went virtual. We started working remotely, but our athletic director, Tanya Vogel, instituted weekly meetings. We called it Friday Fuel. So every Friday at 10 o'clock, we would get on a call with about 150 of our staff members. And one of the first things that she did was she challenged us to get 1% better every day. And I really took that to heart. And I looked at what I was doing from my job perspective. And we also, at the same time, we paused all of our fundraising efforts. So we did not ask anybody for any money in March, April, or May. The world was just full of too many unknowns. So alumni engagement became a huge aspect of my job. And Sarah and I had developed a great relationship prior to COVID. And so we just started talking, and she was hearing from student athletes that their internships were going away, that they weren't securing jobs. And we had this alumni base that really wanted to help too. So just through really conversation and keeping an open dialogue, we came up with a plan to how it exists today. Sarah, do you want to talk about how that evolved a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And Danielle, I think you hit the nail on the head that we saw a need. Our students there was so much in flux. And I think we felt the stress as employees, and people obviously still are daily. But in that time, there were so many unknowns, and especially for our students, they weren't playing. And a lot of them, especially our upperclassmen, where at GW, internships and professional preparation is such a part of the culture. On average, actually, our students have roughly 6 internships throughout their 4 years at GW. So when this happened and internships were being rescinded or full-time jobs were being rescinded, I know I felt it and other people felt it, that there was this need to help prepare our students and help them feel confident going into these next steps. And then we had a ton of alumni reaching out that really wanted to help. So we combined that, and we're going to highlight these later, but we specifically in the summer of 2020 rolled out this professional preparation series where we kind of meshed these 2 needs. And then we also launched a few other initiatives that allowed us to bring alumni into some more traditional student athlete development programming, but got to mix them with our folks and get collaboration from folks in development as well. So that was our GW voting initiative, as well as our mentorship program, which we're going to highlight, and some other leadership academy and student athlete development programs. So really it was across the board, and it allowed us to get some really great engagement, but also just share knowledge from these alumni who had a ton to share, and we had a ton of students who really wanted to hear it. So it was a really productive summer. And then I'll let you, Danielle, talk about kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, so along the road, we have consistently asked for feedback, whether it was through the mentorship program, it was through the our volunteers in the summer series, but that was a big component that we wanted both for alumni engagement and to just for us to understand what was working and what wasn't. So we've continued to assess the impact through various surveys, and we will take that information that we've learned, and we're going to pivot for the spring. And Jillian's probably hearing this, or we have a special guest. I just ruined the surprise, but we have a special guest coming on, one of our mentors. But we will be continuing to enhance some of the programs that we're working on and we've developed throughout this past 9 months. But before we got to the programs that we're really focusing on, we sent a survey out to over 4,000 alumni and 1,800 donors, and we asked them how do they want to participate. And I think it was a survey we sent, and maybe it had about 8 questions on it, so pretty simple. They could fill it out. But I'll kind of take you through all these different alumni engagement opportunities that we proposed to them. Number 1 is becoming a mentor. We had a program that started in 2013, and we continued to enhance it, but we wanted to know, do people really want to spend that much time working with our current student athletes? We asked them if they wanted to participate in informational interviews. It's a, kind of volunteer in a day, done in a day kind of thing. And we thought that was something that they might be interested in. Micro internships. We knew our student athletes were losing their internships, so we wanted to create something that was a little outside the box, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. We asked them if they wanted to participate in a speaker series. We ended up doing one of those, and we'll talk about that in a case study. We have an event every February, and in fact, it's falling next Wednesday, where we will have alumni and student athletes come together from our sophomore class, and we asked them if they want to continue that. Again, Sarah was developing our leadership academy, which we call LEAP, and we wanted to know if they want to be involved in that. And then finally, we asked if they would be willing to host students for a job shadow. We didn't really know at that point if people were, working remotely, or if it was a 2-week thing, or how it was going to develop. So that's kind of where we started. And I think Sarah's going to talk a little bit more specifically about where we went with that data and where we wanted to spend our time.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, so for the bulk of today's presentation, we're going to take you all through 2 specific case studies, and they are going to oversee 2 of those programs that Danielle mentioned. So specifically, the first one, which launched last summer, was a 3-part professional prep summer series. And this was brand new to GW. And it was, our hope was to bring those alumni that had this interest in giving back to our students and allow them to share information in a way that was one, open to all of our students. We actually opened up all of these professional prep series to not only our student athletes, but our entire campus. We really wanted to show that GW athletics was providing value across the board, especially when we weren't playing. And that was one way that we could do that. And these were hour-long panel discussions facilitated by various folks in our department. We had our athletic director, Tanya Vogel, who hosted one of them. We had another associate director and even a head coach at one point facilitate these discussions. And they were all with alumni, from 4 to 5 alumni, and we themed each session. So you can see here that each month we had a different theme, and our hope was to tie into themes that folks across different industries that were majoring in different majors could really get tangible value from. And specifically the first one, the role of resiliency in the face of crisis. We wanted to bring in alumni who overcame some type of crisis or area where they needed resilience, which obviously a lot of us have, but specifically we targeted alumni who had overcome the 2008 recession. And then to our July series, it was called How to Professionally Maximize Your Time During COVID. So we really wanted to target these towards students who didn't have those summer internships, but wanted to find ways to still add things to their resume and continue to move forward. Because something that I sensed when talking to students was that they almost felt stuck or like they weren't sure how to progress during this time. So we really wanted to address that. And we brought in alumni who worked somehow in the sphere of either HR or recruiters that could speak to things that they look for specifically on resumes or just hiring practices in general. And these were folks across all different industry, and they were all GW alumni. And then finally, we really wanted to end the summer with something themed around building and then maintaining relationships. So hence the name, you connected on LinkedIn, and then now what? We wanted these students to hear about and then have tangible ways to continue these relationships that they established throughout the summer. So that was kind of the premise around this professional prep series. And some of the data points around it, we started at around 40 students, and this was completely optional. It was obviously really supported by our administration, which is great, and our head coaches. And then we ended at around 60 participants for our last optional engagement. And this was during the summer when everyone was home. So we were proud of that number, but I also think that there's room for growth in ways that this could be reiterated every summer with new themes to make it still applicable. And now I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, who's going to talk about our second case study.
So Mentorship Program. I think I mentioned previously that we had started this in 2013, and it is definitely something that is recognized by our alums. They email us and ask us, when is the mentorship program starting for this year? I want to be a part of it. But Sarah did some really deep diving on research, and we looked at our numbers before. We had about 50 pairs of mentors and mentees, and through Sarah's research and just through talking with our alumni that had been previous mentors, we felt like we should scale down the program. So we actually limited it to 25. However, we did have over 180 alumni agree to be mentors and submit applications. So that's a whole nother issue that I dealt with on my own, but those are tremendous numbers. And it shows how, I guess, how much our alumni and our donors value this and want to be a part of it. The selection process. Sarah, again, she spent a ton of time and a ton of research on what is the most ideal partnership. And it's not necessarily an alum that's a civil engineer or works in that industry, matching them up with somebody that's majoring in civil engineering. We felt like we wanted to be more holistic, and we have found that our mentorship success and failure rate has dramatically taken a turn for the better this year. You know, I think with those 25 mentorships, we have 3 that maybe we've had to guide in different directions, or, but it certainly has had some, definitely has had a benefit on the success level in terms of the selection process. And I'm sure Sarah would be willing to share the research on it. I don't have it offhand, but Sarah would be a great resource to go to ask more specifics about that. From my end, one of the things we had done about the mentor program is that we've kind of set it and forget it. We would create these partnerships, pair them up, and that would be that. And we might do an exit survey at the end. If there was any problems, people might come to me and say, hey, I've never heard from my mentor. And then I would have to go to the coach and figure that out. But I wanted to be really intentional about engaging with this audience. So I set up basically a calendar, and every month we had a different type of engagement. One of the benefits we've had that I think Sarah mentioned was that our athletic director, Tanya Vogel, had 100% buy-in on this. So whether it was getting her on a call, whether it was her picking up the phone and calling some mentors, our compliance office, explaining compliance rules to our mentors, surveys. And then we just recently in January had a call with our mentors and mentees where we had them on the same Zoom call and just created that sense of community, but also we were seeking feedback as well. So just being intentional about every month checking in with them in some different capacity. And then finally, mentor education and feedback. I can't say enough about the feedback and how important that is to getting better and to pivoting, but also mentor and mentee education. It was something new that we tried, and at the beginning of the pairings, which was in August, we had a separate Zoom call for mentees and a separate Zoom call for mentors, and just really laid out the expectations. Sarah and I were on both calls, and we were able to, I think, clear up how we expected our mentees to act towards our mentors, and then vice versa, and also, put a name to a face. So if they needed resources or had questions, we were there to serve in that capacity. Sarah, did I cover all that?
Yeah, no, I think you killed it. That really the two biggest changes, because we were really lucky that we inherited a mentor program that had a really strong foundation and had brand awareness, like Danielle said, but there is a ton of research, and for those of you that want to look into it, around how often, sadly, forced pairings of mentors sadly aren't successful. So we wanted to be really intentional about, like Danielle said, making these really more holistic pairings and making sure our students knew that this wasn't just to lead to XYZ, a job. If that happens, great, but really that wasn't the goal. It was to help develop skills and learn about other life experiences as well. So that definitely was a process, but I also think the time that we spent going through those mentors and the alumni interested allowed us to have the results that we did. But one thing that Danielle mentioned that I think is so important is for us, especially making these changes, being able to measure them in some way and say, hey, did that have any impact? Did it work at all? Did it not work? So we have been pretty intentional about, obviously in every month when we would have these touch points with the students, getting a pulse of what was happening, but also specifically with our mentors. So the mentor program runs along the academic year, so they're right around the halfway point in December, and that's when we send out a survey to our mentors to get their feedback as well. Super simple, super quick. We know people are busy, and these are just screenshots of some of the questions that we asked, but we wanted it to really be about what was their experience like, but also information that we could use then to revamp the program in the future. So ideally, I was super interested in, one, do they meet expectations, but then also how much engagement is the right amount of engagement? We encouraged our students to reach out to their alumni, their peers, once a month. We encouraged if they wanted more to go for it, but we also wanted to know, like, is that feasible with a Division I student athlete and a full-time working mentor? So it's just really good data points to allow us to have a pulse of both sides of the coin. But with that said, each pairing was unique and each pairing met at different times and different scales as well. So it was more so a general pulse, and it allowed us to get some really great feedback. But with that said, I'm gonna turn it over to Danielle, who's gonna introduce our guest.
Thanks, Sarah. We're gonna do some flipping of screens here. Okay, so you'll notice somebody new just popped on here. Jillian with Stanley is serving as a mentor for us. She's a 2018 GW graduate who served as the captain of the gymnastics team. She now, her title is, let me make sure I get this right, Jillian. She is Finance Strategy and Transformation Consultant at Deloitte. Again, she served as our mentor for the past 2 years. And we wanted to invite Jillian on here because, you know, Sarah and I can talk till we're blue in the face. But I think bringing Sarah on, bringing Jillian on will give you the perspective of a mentor, and she has a very unique story. And I invite her to share it and to give a testimonial of kind of her experience as a mentor and the success that she had this year.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. As Danielle mentioned, this was my second year being a mentor. I also went through the mentorship program as a student athlete when I was still in school at GW and had a really positive experience there. So definitely it was always something I was kind of interested in coming back and giving back to the program in any way that I could. So this fall, I was paired up with a senior on the rowing team at GW, and we were matched due to our interest in the field of consulting. And since our first meeting, we kind of clicked right away. And Catherine, who was my mentee, her main goal was to kind of secure full-time employment in the consulting field and in the consulting space. So I think one thing that I'm sure a lot of student athletes are facing, and just students in general right now, is a lot of apprehension or maybe like anxiety around the job market just in the midst of COVID-19 and everything that's going on. But Catherine was super eager and motivated and gung-ho from the get-go. So that almost made my job as a mentor a little bit easier, but she just knew nothing was going to stand in her way in terms of finding full-time employment in consulting. So we kind of started with our first meeting of outlining some tangible steps that she could take in order to try to aim towards getting a full-time job. And so that included kind of selecting a short list of employers that she may be interested in. We took a look at Handshake, which is GW's platform for recruiting events and on-campus events, and identified some good opportunities for her to network with employers on campus. And we also did a lot of pre-interview prep and resume reviews and stuff like that. So we kind of set our cadence of once a month formally via Zoom to meet face-to-face, but also texted a lot in between. And ultimately, all of this culminated into her obtaining a job with Guidehouse in their life sciences firm. So yes, that was super exciting and really great to see that we were able to set a goal for ourselves kind of from the beginning and ultimately successfully make it there. So.
Awesome, Jillian, thanks for sharing that. And just knowing our audience here, that it's a lot of folks that also work in student athlete development or with just young adults in general. Do you have any tips or just best practices that worked really well with Catherine that you could share with this group, or something that didn't work that you all tried?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I have experienced kind of the improvement that you guys all talked about year over year with the mentorship program. And I think a big difference for me this past year was that we were very clear on like when we were going to meet next and what the objective of that meeting was going to be. Because I think the first few years I went through the program, when it was a little bit more open-ended, our relationships didn't grow as much as mine with Catherine did this year. So just having very clear next steps at the end of every meeting, so you both know what to expect and when you're going to talk next, that definitely was super helpful for us.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to let Jillian sign off right now, but we really appreciate her coming on. You know, we've had a couple different testimonials that people have shared with us, and so Jillian's story is definitely not unique. I think one of the ones that I'd like to share personally is that we had, you know, a mentor-mentee relationship that had nothing, they did not think that they were going to hit it off because they were in very different career industries. However, because of COVID, we had a student athlete that was dealing with a lot of crisis and just unknown. And she came on one day when we had a call in January, and she just said that my mentor was a support system for me emotionally. So, you know, when Sarah and I look back on it, obviously that has a profound impact on what we want to do in the future and why we do this, right? And so I think Jillian's is a great example, but there's so many different other stories that we could tell today. And I just so appreciate that Jillian was able to make it today.
Danielle, I just want to make sure I brought up the screen. You can see the slides and all. We're good to go.
I can, yeah. Do you want to put it in presenter mode?
Yes. I kind of thought I did have it in presenter mode. Let me stop sharing and then re-pull that up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
While you're doing that, full disclosure, we are pre-recording this because I am 9 months pregnant, and we are hoping no one goes into labor tonight or before we get to the live portion of the Q&A. But we are learning how to pivot and learning how to figure out this technology as we go here. There we go.
There we go. Awesome. I appreciate everyone's patience. Let me pull us back one. Awesome. And I'll let you talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that, I talked about is in our March and our April timeline was that I needed to really pivot to alumni engagement as opposed to asking people for money. I presented some of these ideas to my supervisor, who I have a wonderful relationship with, but I could still sense a major hesitation. I think my job is to bring in dollars, and sometimes, even though we were restricted at that time, those restrictions came from a very high level, the presidential level. She still was a little wary of, okay, what are you spending your time on? Is it going to be worth it? However, data talks, right? So I wanted to share these figures with you guys because I think they speak for themselves, and ultimately I was able to share them with my supervisor, and I think she's very proud of the program that Sarah and I created. But ROI, GW has created something called an alumni engagement score. It's based on CASE standards. So CASE is a professional association similar to N4A that fundraisers are a part of. And basically what an alumni engagement score is, I put a little explanation at the bottom here, but I'll read it. It's an internal score that provides a baseline to measure growth in alumni engagement over time. And the score is basically representative of 4 different areas. The first one is philanthropic, so giving. The second one is volunteer. The third one is experiential, so events. And then communication, like, do we just have people's email addresses and do they open their email? The score is based out of 100. And when we started this, our alumni engagement score was 9.1. The next quarter, it jumped to 13.3. So we had a significant increase in alumni engagement. And a lot of it was through our interactions and through these programs that Sarah and I were developing. So I'm happy to share more on that if anybody has any questions on that, but I wanted to point that out. And then giving rate. So starting in June, we were allowed to ask for money again. And we categorize all of our alumni and our donors as volunteers, so we can pull these lists and pull this data. But in the fiscal year of 2020, we could pull that our volunteer giving rate, so people that volunteered, increased to 7.5%. So that's a huge jump in giving of this subset. And again, it was another point of pride that I could share with our supervisor, with Tanya, our athletic director, to show that what we were doing was making an impact.
I think it's a really good transition, Danielle, into kind of us sharing a little bit about what works really well, but also some of the challenges and the hurdles that we saw. But specifically, as you mentioned, our athletic director, we were very fortunate that we had incredible support from our senior leadership, not only within the athletic department, but also across the university. To give you an example, we actually have our VP and Dean of Students, VP of Student Affairs and Dean of Students. was one of our mentors for not only one of our programs, and we'll talk about our multiple programs, but multiple of our student athletes. And she wasn't even a student athlete in her prior life. So it was pretty cool to see that type of involvement. And for us, it was great because in a time when sports weren't being played, there was questions about jobs, about anything you can think of in collegiate athletics. We've all been there. A lot of us may still be there. It was an opportunity to show the value that our student athletes can add and that the athletic department can add across the university, even when we are competing. So it really was a point of pride for us. And honestly, the ROI that Danielle shared in those data points was truly just the icing on the cake. And with that said, we really, really took pride in establishing this collaboration. And it wasn't just between development and fundraising and student athlete development. It was across the department and across the university. And we really wanted there to be great knowledge management. We wanted there to be ways that this could continue when things change. We've had transitions myself. Danielle, like she mentioned, is 9 months pregnant and could leave at any moment to have a great little baby. But we want there to be a way for this to continue to evolve and get better. So for us, it was big to establish and build upon this foundation. And that was through constant communication. It was through these data points, and it was through creating knowledge management that could transcend ourselves and just our roles, but be more across GW athletics as a whole. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Sarah. My job is to work with alumni, but in addition to that, I have very close relationships with our coaches. Now, full disclosure, again, my husband is a coach at GW. He coaches the swimming and diving team, so that makes it a little bit easier. But trust is such an important aspect of that, and so we have a couple offshoots of mentor programs that have existed for a long time. Jillian, I'm sure, would tell you that gymnastics has had a mentoring program. Men's basketball has a mentoring program. Men's rowing has a mentoring program. So we knew this. And what Sarah and I, what we didn't want to do is say, hey, you can't have these other mentorships or these other programs. We wanted to take the mentorship program that was kind of centralized and that any student athlete could participate in and set a standard. In addition, we wanted to say, okay, these are the resources that we are giving to our alums, giving to our mentors and mentees, and share those with these offshoots. I think ideally, we'd love to have one central mentorship program, and I'll give you an example of why that is. So Sarah mentioned that our VP and Dean of Students, Sissy Petty, was one of our mentors, and we got on a call in January. And she said in front of everybody, Jillian might have heard this too. She said, yeah, I have 3 mentees, 2 women's basketball and a swimmer, and I haven't heard from 2 of that out of the 3. And I'm thinking, well, we only paired you with 1, so I don't know where this other mentor or these mentees are coming from. People have an understanding that we represent the mentorship program, and we want to make it as successful as possible and the best partnership possible with everybody involved. So definitely setting our mentorship program at a high standard, but also helping others elevate their program as well. We're talking about successes and failures because we did a lot of learning in these past 9 months. One of the things that our mentors came to us and said that they wanted was to build this sense of community, and we wanted the same thing. So somebody suggested we create a LinkedIn group and have a private group where mentees and mentors could come together and have a chat and share ideas and things like that. We did it. We spent the time putting the emails together and the groups together and getting graphics for it. And it really hasn't taken off like I think the mentors expected and like I think we wanted to. But we need to try those things. And I think that's the beauty of athletics, right? Like we're not afraid to try things and fail. And that's what other departments, whether it might be, the business school or our med school or law school, are looking to us and saying, wow, what's athletics doing? Because a lot of stuff is working. Well, a lot of stuff isn't working as well, but we're not afraid to try. So that's one of the beauties of being part of athletics. And then Sarah touched on this a little bit, but just collaboration. And that's really why we're here today. Sarah worked in internal and I worked in external, but yet I think our personality has lended itself to collaboration and just to talking. And that's kind of where we got where we are today, but it wasn't just the two of us. You saw some beautiful graphics that we put in the slides, and that was done through our marketing and communications office. They realize the investment and they're willing to help, and they're willing to put their time into it too. For what's that saying? A rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so I think there's so many different departments that have touched what Sarah and I have done. And we're just the facilitators. So it's been a fun project to work with. Okay, so now where do we go from here? Again, we continue to seek feedback. So we have a plan of what we want to do moving into this kind of second semester, right? The first thing we're going to do is we are launching a crowdfunding initiative where we want to raise $15,000 to support professional development for our student athletes. It's I don't know if you guys have ever worked with Give Campus. I highly recommend it. We did an October campaign and it went really well, but I'm happy to share the link next week when I think we do our live Q&A. We might be live with our fundraiser. So feel free to check that out. We have some student athletes creating videos on that, and we already have buy-in from SAC on it and our coaches. So again, just increasing funding. And the reason why we want to fundraise is because we want to incorporate game plan into our professional development series. If you haven't heard of game plan, I encourage you to Google it. Some of the things we're looking to do with them is NLI education. We still don't know what that's going to look like, but we certainly know we need to educate our student athletes, our coaches, and our administrators on that. Another big thing that they do is they centralize a mentor program. If you go to GW Athletics, you can see some of our surveys, you can see our applications, but game plan will help us centralize that. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about our last component.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Danielle. And I feel like this flows very nicely, but we had this idea, and you might have seen it on one of our earlier slides, and this stemmed from the need that we saw that we've mentioned, that folks this past summer were losing internships, a lot of our student athletes, or just weren't able to find things due to the market and everything. And this idea was springing around, and I don't want to own it. It is something that I've read about and is happening at other higher education institutions as well. But this idea of micro internships. And for those of you that haven't heard of micro internships, these are project-based experiences, and they're ideally shorter than a full-blown traditional internship. So what we were hoping to do, and in all honesty, we just couldn't get it off the ground in time. Things were crazy past summer, but the groundwork is there, and GW hopes to launch a micro internship program. And what this would look like would be project-based experiences, ideally 2 to 7 weeks in length, 40 hours in total. But the idea is these would be with alumni. So it would be alumni proposing projects that they would hope to be paired with a student athlete to accomplish. And the whole rationale behind that is that really on a resume, employers do not care if you got paid or not. They care about the skills that you developed. And from our side, it's great engagement and collaboration, but for the student, it is a tangible work and experience and skill development that they can put on their resume. So there were some really great ideas. We had alumni that are interested, and we actually have data points on those alumni who were interested. So hopefully there is this foundation, like we've mentioned, that I can grow from. But it's just such a cool concept, I think, to have it be project-based, not necessarily time-based, but more so actually tangible things that these students could help people with. I mean, some of the ideas were some of our alumni that had their own businesses needed someone to develop a social media campaign or a strategy, or maybe I know we even had ideas about people helping us with research or to do XYZ. So it's a cool way to collaborate between student athletes and alumni directly and actually give them something to put on a resume. So there are some institutions that do this really well and have some great programs that we are looking at as well. So feel free to reach out and I can share the content on that as well. But really
I want to go back to those micro internships because like I have thoughts as we're presenting, right? First off, we do know that some of these micro internships, like that Georgetown or Swarthmore, these are some of the schools that we kind of took the model from. They are funding these at like a $400 to $800 level. So the students have some type of stipend. So that's definitely something we would love to use from our crowdfunding or from a fundraising perspective. Again, alumni engagement, showing the ROI, showing the direct impact we can have on student athletes. Also, we haven't really talked about this, and Sarah, I'm sure you can speak more than I can, but the average number of internships that GW students have is 6, right?
Yep, 6 over their 4 years, so it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and we know that our student athletes probably don't have time to do 6. I mean, that would require almost to do 2 in a summer, right? So we felt like this would be like perfect opportunity to bridge student athletes with the need for or want and desire for internships. So
absolutely, Danielle. And even on that point, what I think was so attractive to this micro internship was the time frame. I didn't mention this earlier, but I was a student athlete at the University of Iowa and time is limited. We all know that. But specifically for those student athletes that might actually have a winter break and have 6 weeks to give, this is very practical and could be things that folks do while they're at home, even if they can't give a summer because they're training. So we liked how practical and how it could actually be implemented with a really busy and competitive student athlete. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Danielle. I would have totally forgotten. So with that said, we can't thank you all enough for logging on. It's been fun for us to put this together, but also really just wanted to share authentically some things that worked really well and didn't. But please reach out with any questions that you have. We are all about sharing and we have these documents, we have surveys we can share, the mentor-mentee education slides we put a lot of time into and are happy to share resources. So our emails are here, but please reach out at any point. And I know we're gonna have time for Q&A as well, but just wanna say thank you for logging on and the attention today. Danielle, you have anything you wanna add?
No, I'll just echo that. And I look back on this presentation and Sarah, we did a lot.
It was a busy time.
Yeah, but so fun. And it's been so fun connecting with Sarah again, putting this presentation together. And we're really excited to share this with you guys. So without further ado, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, ladies. We can definitely tell the chemistry between you guys. That was an awesome presentation. I was fully engaged. So thank you for all of your insight and sharing some phenomenal information with today's participants. At this time, as you guys mentioned, we do have a few minutes to take a couple of questions from all of you all in the audience. So as a reminder, please feel free to use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen to pose a question. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can before the top of the hour. All right, ladies, so the first question that you have is, did you have any issues with compliance for the mentorship program?
That is a great question. I'm gonna actually turn that over to Danielle because I think she had some nuggets to share there. And just a side technology thing, Adrian, I don't think we can share our videos, which isn't a huge deal, but just want to let you know.
Okay, yes, Sarah, thank you for that. I will take that. And actually, if I can get my video up and running, I saw that question come in early and I ran upstairs and grabbed a NCAA rules for alumni, faculty, and friends. Oh, here we go. Here's my video. I'm going to show it to you guys. So we published something like this. Again, collaboration. Our compliance director created this. And this is probably the 3rd year in a row we've done that. And we send that out to every single volunteer throughout the year. So that's our first kind of, education piece. And we have been doing this mentorship program for 6 years now. So compliance was a little different 6 years ago. So I think it's a little bit of a grandfather. I know I've talked to other programs like Penn State, and they have to keep a really
fine line between their alumni base and their current student athletes. At GW, we have a wonderful compliance department that understands the value of what we're doing, and we are able to do this. I think one tip that I've heard before is that you can get third parties to help with mentorships, and they create kind of bigger boundaries than we would. So I encourage you to reach out to some of those programs. I'm sure Game Plan might help with that as well. It's definitely something we're going to look into, or we're going to purchase because of their mentorship program.
Excellent. So the next question is about the slides. So we do want to just, again, just reiterate the fact that we pre-recorded this just in case Danielle had a baby pop up on us in the midst of our presentation. And so what we'll do is we'll get everyone's email addresses, and we'll make sure that everyone is able to receive a copy of today's slides, just in case you were unable to read them during the presentation. So the next question says, what time of the day were the series offered, and who is in charge of making sure the student athletes are informed of the program, connecting the student athlete with a mentor, and receive follow-up? Basically, who or what department oversees the overall operation?
That is a great question that has multiple questions in it. So if I don't cover something, please let me know. But yeah, that is, so we went back and forth for the first question about timing multiple times. And I actually think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, that we actually changed the timing. So if you all recall from the presentation, there were 3 separate sessions that we did starting in June, and we strategically tried to do it after the school year started, and then with enough lead time when folks jump back into school in August. And we the first one I recall, it was around 5 o'clock. It was like, ideally we wanted like after work time, and we didn't have as much engagement, I think, as we had hoped. So we actually moved it to the lunchtime frame. But I recall it was 12 to 1 or 12:30 to 1:30, and we saw greater engagement there. But something to keep in mind too is, like, no matter what, you're going to miss out on someone, because at that time there's folks working, there's folks taking summer classes. And similarly with the nighttime, like there's night classes. And for anyone that works in student athlete development or any type of programming, you're always going to miss someone. So it's trying to hit the masses in some form or fashion. And when it came to ownership, I would say it was duly collaborative, but probably the actual pushing out came out of student athlete development. But really it was very collaborative. It was myself sharing information with our head coaches, who would then push it out, or to our administration, who would share in a head coaching call. So I would say it originated in the student athlete development department, but it was absolutely a joint effort when it came to pushing it out. And I would say when it came to the actual wording and even the language, it was Danielle, myself, and we had have a really great colleague, Julia Brown, who worked similarly in student athlete development like work, and really helped craft a lot of this as well. So really a joint effort, but I would say if there was like one owner, it was probably student athlete development. Did I hit everything, Christine? I don't even know.
Yeah, you did great.
Okay, great.
All right, so let's move on. So the next question said, how did you create student athlete buy-in?
That is the name of the game in student athlete development and any programming, I feel like. And I don't think anyone has like one true golden answer, but I will say what it really, really helped us, especially in the summer series, that I think it was challenging because students were home, there wasn't much going on, and we wanted to provide opportunities for them to engage, but it was completely optional. No one was on campus. There was a lot of other stressors going on. And whenever we had our coaches help share information, it was much more successful. And I think, I mean, for anyone that's played under a coach, when your coach tells you or informs you of something, you're going to listen a little bit more. So it very much makes sense. And we had great support from our senior leadership, and our athletic director would even send out some point-to-point contact, which was super, super successful. And if I'm going to talk honestly, we had a lot of the same folks come to all 3 sessions. So I think if you're confident in your product, if you can get them there the first time, hopefully that sells them. And then word of mouth is huge with any students. If someone likes it and got something out of it, they're going to tell a teammate and hopefully bring a teammate as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Danielle?
Yeah, sure. So we're doing this networking event that's usually in person tomorrow night. We have 75 people registered for it. We mandate it for sophomores, and then if the juniors and seniors want to come, they can. And we have a significant number of juniors and seniors. So I think that goes to Sarah's point. Like, if you put up a good product, people are going to return and see the ROI on it.
Excellent. All right. So the next question said, did you have objectives set for the monthly mentor meetings, or did they develop those individually?
That's a great question. That was an evolution. And that is something that we're working on second semester. And we got that feedback in January saying that, we had given them some suggested topics, but not really a specific outline. And we heard from our mentors in our January call that they wanted kind of, action points and then follow up. So we have put together kind of 4 different opportunities for them to discuss, whether it might be reading an article or listening to a podcast together and then coming back together. I will be transparent. Sarah and I are both part of Women Leaders, and we've been through their mentoring program. And that really is set a gold standard for us. And we did a lot of collaboration and a lot of thinking about like, how can we carry that into our program? And so, again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just, using what we've learned through our programs, and it's been fun.
And something to add on just right there before I forget. So we did, like Danielle shared earlier, have an education session at the very beginning. And this was the first year that was mandated for not only mentees, but our mentors actually hopped on as well. And with the mentees, we did actually for that first session have them establish goals for their year. And we wanted them to be measurable, so like tangible and within things that they could actionably do. And we required very little, but it was to share certain things with their mentors in that first touch point. And one of them was goal setting and these different things that they had done as pre-work to share with them. But other than that first session, it was pretty much on them to craft a plan, but we really encouraged the sharing of agendas or some type of touch point to help guide that conversation. So then they didn't lose steam.
All right, excellent. The questions keep on rolling. So how did you match mentors and mentees?
What a lofty question. Well, so we, again, we had this survey that went out early summer, I'd say. We tried to launch as early as possible to try to get this off the ground early, especially when COVID hit. We ideally wanted to start this throughout the summer. So it was a pretty extensive survey. Everything from the typical, what do you do now? Your LinkedIn, like what did you major in? But the questions I'd say that were a little bit different were specifically like, what are you looking for in a pair? So do you have preference with gender? Do you have preference with age? And I think why that's important is like, one, who do you connect with? And do you want to be paired with someone who's a senior executive, or would you rather relate to someone who's 5 years out from undergrad? Like there are these things that you can pair people upon that aren't just career focused and industry focused. So we really tried to get at the more holistic approach, like Danielle said. So that was one example of a question, but I'm happy if it's helpful, whoever this is, send us an email and we can pull some of those survey questions for you. So off the top of my head, that's like the one that sticks out to me. I don't know if you recall anymore, Danielle. So yeah, reach out to us and I'm happy to pull some of those, but really getting at like what they were looking for in the pairing outside of just career focused.
All right, excellent. All right, so are you continuing your LinkedIn page, even though you mentioned it didn't take off as you expected? And why do you think it wasn't as successful as you hoped? How much work is it on your end to maintain the LinkedIn page?
Well, I mean, I think the hardest part was just launching it, right? And then our intent was to publish something once a month. But, some people might not have notifications tied to their email. It didn't become a conversation. So we realized probably within first semester that, there was probably better efforts to our time. So we have just picked up with email communication. And then, like I said, in January, we hosted this Zoom where we brought everybody together. We have another LinkedIn group that has about 750, 750 current student athletes and GW alumni, and we post on that pretty frequently. So I think we even posted about maybe this presentation. We have our bicentennial event, a celebration of the 200th anniversary. We'll post about that, just different engagements that we can use. And that's really where we're spending our efforts and our time.
All right, excellent, ladies. All right, any other questions? We may have time for about one or two more. So we'll give just some pause for any other questions to roll in, and then we will conclude. All right, thank you, ladies, for posting your email addresses in the chat. All right, so thank you all for your thoughtful questions and participation. Presenters, do you have any final comments before we conclude?
No, just appreciate N4A for the platform and everyone for hopping on. Please let us know if we can help with anything.
I agree. I'll echo Sarah's thoughts. She says it so well. And thank you again for having us on.
No, absolutely. No, we are so grateful to have you guys. This is an amazing program. I hope everyone on this call today was able to take something from it. On behalf of N4A and its leadership, thank you for taking the time out of your day to provide some helpful information and best practices for our membership. So that concludes today's presentation. As a reminder, you guys are encouraged to participate in a brief survey following the conclusion of this session. So as soon as we hit that end button, you should be prompted to participate in a brief survey. We would love your feedback, and we do appreciate your participation in advance. So please have a great and safe day. And thank you again, ladies. You are amazing, and we've enjoyed having you here today.
Thanks, Christine and Adrian. Appreciate it.